How's everybody? Give us your form score. Can we have your cameras on? How are you out of 10 today? How are you feeling? How is everybody? I'm about a 5. How are you all? Honest truth. How you doing? Oh, almost. We've got a few 9s, 6. We've got a two out at the top there. Okay, cool. Well, welcome, and hopefully by the end of the session we'll have a good conversation and we'll all kind of feel better about the world and where we are in it. But look, I'm not going to talk. My name's Ali Hannon. I'm the Chief Exec and founder of Creative Equals, and we have an amazing lineup panel for you here today in partnership with Advertising and Queer Britain. And I'm going to just hand straight over to Bhavik, who's from our team. He's our amazing capabilities director. And Bhavik, I'm going to hand over to you to run today.
Excellent, thank you very much, Ali. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session. So I'm Bhavik, I am part of the Creative Equals team, and today we'll be talking about LGBTQ+ representation in advertising and in campaigns. And part of the conversation will be about our representation across the whole of that process. And I'm really pleased to be joined by a wonderful group of people who are experts and have so much knowledge and experience to share with me and with you all. So as part of this afternoon, you will have an opportunity to hear from them about some of their examples of what they've seen that's great and some of the things that we could do and want to do as we look to the future. But we want to hear from you as well. So as we are having some of these discussions, if there's things that you hear that you feel, actually, I feel quite strongly about what's being said, then please use the chat function, which you should see at the bottom of the screen. Type in your comments, and to kickstart it, you might want to share with us where you are joining us from. Ali has just typed in hello, just in case you can't see it. And also ask us questions. We have our super amazing team supporting us, and they will be capturing some of the key themes of what comes out of these, of the questions that you guys share. So there will be an opportunity towards the end for you to ask our experts some questions as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to our panel. I'm going to start by inviting Joe, who is from Queer Britain, and really pleased that you can join us. So if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Bhavik, and thank you, Ali, thank you for hosting and organising this today. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of an organisation, a charity called Queer Britain. We're working very hard to establish a national LGBTQ+ museum for everybody. Now, one of the reasons why this is such an important panel this evening, I think I'm moving the day quicker, this afternoon, is that the very basis of why we're establishing this museum is because of historical erasure and misrepresentation in the popular culture. And there's been this huge gap missing from the popular culture that we are determined to play our part by filling. By establishing a bricks and mortar national LGBTQ+ museum for everybody. So that's for everybody, regardless of their gender identity or their sexuality. I keep coming back to the idea of a young woman who has just come out to her mother, and I want to create a place that they can both go to together and come away feeling represented and excited to be part of this set of communities that we all belong to.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Joe, and really pleased that you could be here, and great to hear more about the Queer Britain work. And I know throughout this, the audience will have an opportunity to hear a little bit more. We'll also direct them to.
Bhavik, you've gone quiet.
Oh, is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
complex.
And as Ali has also said, all of your donations will be going to Queer Britain. So thank you for those of you who've contributed so far as well. Tamara.
Hi there, it's lovely to be here. Thank you. I'm Tamara Littleton. I'm the CEO and founder of The Social Element, which is a social media agency. And we work with huge global brands, including HSBC and Oreos and Peloton, Smirnoff, Visa, and been going for about 19 years and absolutely delighted to be here.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Chris.
I'm Chris Kenna. I'm the CEO and founder of Brand Advance Group, which is a group of companies, Brand Advance, Deca, and Sentiment. And all of them companies are sort of work with brands to help them reach diversity in all of its diverse array. So from Black, Indian, race, religion, sexual orientation, age, gender empowerment, etc. Just making sure advertising does what advertising is supposed to do, which is get to everybody.
Brilliant, thank you, and welcome, Chris. Lucy?
Hi, well, my day job's a strategist, brand and advertising, but my gay job, as a few people use, is a volunteer director at Outvertising, which is the world's first LGBTQ+ network in advertising. It's all just volunteers since 2016. Anyone interested, come along, get involved. But we're there really to look after the LGBTQ+ community in the advertising industry, and fundamentally to increase proper, fair, positive representation of the community in the creative output from that same industry.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lucy. And Ben?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. I am the Chief Creative Officer at M&C Saatchi. And for me, as a gay man with a seat at the table, I am curious not just about on-screen representation, but all the steps before something gets to screen. What representation is there right through that supply chain? So yes, who's in the story matters, but whose story was it to begin with, I think is as important.
Brilliant. And to start with that and kind of leading on from that, then I'd like to pose the first question. And Ben, if I could ask you, and we'll invite the others to chip in. And when we think about some of the past portrayal of representation, I guess, in front of the screen of the LGBTQ+ community, what examples have you seen that are positive, and I guess why were they positive?
There aren't a lot of examples is the first part of that answer. I think that the difference between positive and negative isn't so much for me what's on screen as the intention behind why it was there. And often the negative ones stand out because the feeling for me is they've been put on screen because the brand wants to be seen to have included an LGBTQ+ community for the benefit of a straight audience, as opposed to they've done it for reasons of inclusivity or genuinely wanting to reach that audience. And that therefore that intention behind why they're there in the first place plays out in that on-screen performance, because you see that sort of cliched rainbow flag. There is a gay person here and you need to know there is a gay person here, or a lesbian person here, or a trans person here, or a non-binary person here. And we're going to put all the cues there so that you know that, as opposed to someone is there because they're a person first. And so I think that whole intent of the casting and why someone ended up on screen, are you there to be a gay person, or are you there to be a human who happens to be gay? It starts from that first decision. And I think the poor examples, unfortunately, are often the overtly flag waving. You are there to be gay first, as opposed to the genuinely inclusive, you're there to be a human first, and the other things follow on.
Yeah, really good point. And Lucy, your experience with what you do with advertising, you've seen quite a few examples of some really brilliant work that's being done, and some of that tokenism that I guess Ben was referring to. So I'd really love to hear some of your thoughts and views on that as well.
Sorry, you dropped out a wee bit there, but I think you were referencing the advertising awards, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly, you know, there's some great examples if you go to advertising.org from the awards. You know, like the Renault 30 years in the making. I'm sure many of you will have seen. And we, you know, just to hero that one, slightly to Ben's point, you know, that is it's very much a narrative around a LGBTQ+ individuals, but they did proper research, and they also committed to really delivering that at a brand level across the nation, and defending that point of view and really owning it. But they only got to that kind of very nuanced, sensitive. They weren't overly sexualizing. They were telling some other elements of, you know, it's a love story. I mean, the whole thing with Renault is, you know, like, but they made a standpoint 30 years on from their old cliche, like Nicole, you know, stuff, to move into actually this is for everyone, and for example, this. And it's not just the execution, the storytelling, the insights that they leveraged, but actually how they then delivered it that we wanted to respect. And it comes to utilizing difference, I think, is really powerful. So we're not just going to champion, you know, just because it's so overtly like about a gay ad, but because it's actually serving the community in a positive way. And Ben, to your point about the rainbow washing and people just doing stunts just to get in there, I guess we do have a slight stance of we appreciate brands having a go and trying to get involved and trying to talk to the community. They just don't always do it very well. And part of our awards, we have a challenge which is open to anyone to enter. And in that, you know, we saw a whole extreme from cliche, unhelpful, and rainbows smashed everywhere, and it wasn't authentic in any way. And then through the process, we actually saw it transforming and the outcome of some really beautiful concepts and ideas, which were powerful ads doing their job, but just so happened to feature a gay protagonist, for example. In a really positive light. So there, yeah, but yes, they can, a lot of ads can do much better, but we want to sort of encourage them to do it. And I think the key thing is just reach out to people in the community and networks and support to actually check and validate what you're doing. There's loads of great companies out there that are doing, that can give you a qual group just for a very niche sector through to bodies that, you know, like advertising, we can give you advice and stuff, but yeah.
Interesting, and I'm really pleased that you shared, you talked about the Renault advert, because I remember when that one came out, being tagged in that and shared that with friends. And that goes back to Ben's point. The reason that my friends were doing that is because there isn't much representation. So when we see something that we think, actually, this is great, it's representative of our community, have a look at it and what do you think, whether it's positive or not so much, like you said again, Lucy, about the fact that they've had a go, it is kind of being put in front of us because there's not much of it out there. Tamara, what's your thoughts on our positive examples of what you've seen?
Well, I was a massive fan of the Renault ad as well, but the one that has really caught my eye this year has been the Cadbury's Cream Egg ad that features a real life gay couple in the actual ads. But I think the key thing for me was that it wasn't that sense of the whole ad was about them. They were just sort of part of the narrative. It felt like they weren't being sort of othered, as it were. So that's one of my favorites. What I would say, I'm just going to try and share this one because this is quite an interesting example. So go back to 2019, and this is a really good example from Listerine of perhaps not the best approach of people just sort of wrapping a flag around a Listerine bottle. I'm far too polite to read out some of the tweets, but if anyone does get that link, some of the backlashes, it's freaking hilarious actually, but it's not what a brand would want. And I think that is something really interesting, is that you do get that backlash if you don't really have the right to be in the conversation. And flip that around, one of our clients is Oreos, and of course I think they're doing an amazing job, but they really are doing an amazing job because they don't just do Pride campaigns, you know, in the month of Pride. They have an approach now where they're looking at this all year round, and they do have some beautiful campaigns. There was one that was called Proud Parents. I'll share the link in a minute, but this one was, it was so well done. It was a coming out story for a girl taking her girlfriend back home, and the sort of, you know, the father being a bit awkward, and it builds up to a lovely end. I won't spoil it. But interestingly for me, I think it's that Oreo, because they are kind of looking at this all the time and not just in campaigns, they do actually do a lot of content. And then what we see is the ongoing conversations. So I just wanted to sort of like change the conversation a little bit, if that's okay, is that to me, it's about the everyday conversation. So if you picture that my team are social media managers, we're on the front line, we're talking back to the consumers. So we see them celebrating what Oreos are doing, but we also see them boycotting products. For example, when Oreos did a whole selection of packaging that came with a sort of packaging that included like a little Oreos pin that encouraged people that said, ask me my pronoun. It was a really kind of cool approach. But then we're reading comments from the public saying, I am never going to eat Oreos again. You make me sick, boycott Oreos, and just, you know, full of hate. And what we found with our clients is it's so important to stand up to that backlash. And I think the brands that have earned the right to be in the conversation and who are doing great work and who are part of the community, it's easier for them to stand up for their values. And so we help them tell the haters to piss off, basically, and we kind of stand up for the brand. So it's a slightly different approach.
And Chris, I wanted to come to you because the work you and your team do is kind of getting our voices heard to and seen by the people like us. So how can we make sure that brands are talking with people like you so that they are using LGBTQ plus businesses?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, they don't need to just talk to people like me to do it. They can just, you know, it's easy to get out and find LGBTQ plus creatives, LGBTQ plus media owners, etc. You know, just a quick 2 minutes on Google will find you a load of people. Obviously, I secretly want them all to come to me, but what they should actually be doing is doing that research. I think we talk a lot about authenticity. It's this word that's branded around a lot. There is no one thing you can do to be authentic, in my view. I can only speak from my view, so people might not agree, but there isn't. It doesn't. For me, it matters less what's the reason why a brand is doing something than the journey that they do it. So whatever the CEO and the top, they probably don't really get why their 30-year brand all of a sudden on the 31st year now needs to make sure that it's representing these demographics. And if we kid ourselves in thinking you're going to change their minds, we're going to be here for another 30 years. You know, that's why we've even gone past the stage of, you know, the conversation of getting your house in order, because we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now if all the houses were in order. If all companies had people that represent us, then we wouldn't be having this. This would not be a panel, because we'd already be in there, sat at the table saying, actually, what about this? What about the, you know, and a lot less mistakes would be made, a lot less stereotyping would be made, because, you know, somebody along that sign off would see it. But I think to answer the question of why, I hope I've answered how you should do it. You know, just including people from the community in every stage of it. So through ideation, you know, let's stop worrying about whether you've got enough LGBTQ plus people in the office to even think about doing a campaign, or whether you've got the right documentation attached to your website that no one ever reads anyway, before you're going to start to speak to people like me. I am a consumer and I'm here now, and I've given 38 of my years for you to come and speak to me. Start doing it straight away, you know? There's lots. You don't need to have the house in order. You can hire in freelancers. You can go to specialist agencies or go to specialist insights companies that can give you that insight, so that you can feel empowered and your team can feel empowered to make sure that they're going to do a campaign that truly reflects that demographic. And then I think we as a community as well have got to not always just straight away go on the attack when a brand does do it. You know, where have you been for the last 30 years, and absolutely annihilate them? Because then, you know, the people that were not really quite sure they should have done it anyway, you've absolutely just proved them right. And I think we truly do need to take that as a community. We do need to think about that angle, that if we knock every brand that's going to do it now that they've all become woke, then they're all going to go back and hide away for 30 years again. And then we're going to have to keep having panels like this to keep reminding people that we're here, you know. So I think, yeah, I've said a lot there, but I hope that helps.
No, I think that's a really good point, because often we do kind of almost become the woke police of, right, why have you started to join the conversation now? And maybe we should be celebrating more when they have taken that step to join the conversation. Maybe it is that reflection of, hang on a second, we've been afraid of starting or being part of this conversation because we didn't feel like we had the right. But if we wait for that, like you said, Chris, that it might be another 20, 30 years, but actually we know the right thing to do for the community, for our environment, and actually the people who work with us and our consumers, is that we are involved in some form or another. And Ben, Chris's point around, and actually for the whole of the panel, Chris's point around making sure that we have our voices heard throughout that whole process, whether it's from insights like Lucy said, or speaking to, I guess, target audience. How can we encourage, I guess, businesses to talk more to, involve the LGBTQ plus throughout that process? And also, how do we get the LGBTQ plus community involved?
I think to pick up on the point from Chris, the first point is not to scare people off. You know, it's not to hold a brand who's done something and got it wrong to public account. I mean, the Listerine rainbow bottle was a terrible example. And it's, you know, when we sort of sit here and go, well, you put a rainbow on something, that's a bit lazy. You know, all visibility is a start and all efforts are a start. I think what we've got to encourage is that brands have fantastic budgets, fantastic platforms, and access to people with fantastic creativity. So they have all the tools they need to go beyond that bare basics of rainbow stripes and rainbow flags to achieve something so much more. I think that's why it's frustrating when it's wrong, because you know that that potential is there and that creativity and that opportunity was there. So therefore, having those conversations and thinking about, you know, I say that not just the on-screen representation moment, but when you're looking at a director or a photographer or a writer, all of those people that are involved in getting that story to the screen are aware that the difference actually can start, and mean that when you get to screen, you've got something that is more informed, more nuanced, and just frankly more interesting, because along the way you learned something beyond a rainbow flag that meant that you were able to create something that had real heart or real meaning to it.
Yeah, because fundamentally diversity is enriching, and it, you know, research is showing that more and more, from creative to actual efficacy of communication, like the connection, the standout. I'm going to, but if you go to advertising, there's a free white paper you can download, but we encourage people to do it because it's got some stats, it's being updated, but there's still some very pertinent stats in there that are compelling as to why businesses should be, as long as it's aligned with their values and it's authentic, engaging and investing in LGBT, not only as an audience, but as representing them and featuring them as a rich part of their narrative and storytelling. Because it is more, you know, it's improved cut through, increases brand preference. This is all the UK. You know, there are some countries in the world this wouldn't apply to at the moment, but there's some really, really powerful facts that of why it's good for people.
Like 3 times more likely to buy the product, 2.1 times more likely to return. This is all by the ASA. It's from what Lucy's talking about from the advertising, the stats. But and you know, as I'm sure most of you have heard me go off on a lot of these, and we speak about this a lot, and I think, you know, we talk about, we sort of continuously give reasoning for it, but let's break it down to the bare. Most of us on here, I don't know the background, but we're marketeers. So one thing we should be doing is getting our clients' product in front of as many people as possible and making as many people as possible want to purchase, use said brand or service. That's our job. There's no more complicated than that, just to get it in front of as many people as possible and make them want it. Now, gone are the days where one advert makes everybody want to buy the same thing. That's gone. We all now, we know our community's worth. We understand our individuality. We know that our difference is a superpower now. So them days have gone now. You know, old school advertising. Now we're in the new school advertising, and that means speaking to different demographics in a way that resonates with them demographics. And the LGBTQ plus community is a massive demographic. So why we have to, you know, explain us from the community, have to explain the worth of us as a consumer, where we over-index on pretty much every, you know, spike you can think of, shopping and all of that, you know. And so, yeah, I think pretty soon this conversation needs to shift out from, and it's great that people like Ali put these on to just keep it going. But soon it's going to need to be the other side that needs to have this, you know, have a panel discussion on how you're going to make us buy your brand, rather than why we're important to your brand. Have a panel discussion on what kind of insights do you need to make your brand relevant to me, because rise of the conscious consumer is always here, already here. We already know. We've known for the last 10 months that we don't need any brand really, apart from Tesco's and Lidl. Everything else we're done with. We don't have to go to Soho House every week now. We can get through life, even if Boris makes us stay in our kitchen, you know? So I think this conversation needs to flip to being the brands asking how can they better reach us, rather than us, you know, having the conversation of why are we important to the brand.
And it's also important, isn't it, to say, how do we move out of this History Month pride?
Yeah.
And, you know, like certainly running an LGBT charity, LGBTQ plus charity, I have to turn down so many of these things for History Month, because it's just too, you know, just end up with styes and kind of exhausted. But I remember at Pride, when we were last allowed out, walking down Oxford Street, and it just being like exhausting how many rainbows and how much there was, and actually coming past that exhaustion and thinking, well, do you know what, this is such a good problem to have, because, you know, it's not everybody's doing it right, but by God, at least they're trying to do something now, and at least they recognize that this is something. So how do we then, exactly to your point, move away from it being, you know, that kind of performative once, twice a year, we've ticked that box, to actually talking to people about their lives, and the marrow of their lives. So yeah, I think that's really important. And the other thing is that I'm so sick of having conversations with, particularly with, you know, senior leaders in organisations, where there's so much hand-wringing and so much kind of like, well, oh, diversity is difficult. It's diversity it's a challenge, and it's like, it's not a fucking challenge. It's an opportunity, and if you are not taking that opportunity, then good riddance. You know, you're missing all the fun for as much as anything.
I mean, it just makes me think of, sorry, just when we say diverse, and you know, I mean, what was the YouGov 2018 study, I think, showed that over half of young people, that's 18 to 25, identified as not 100% heterosexual. So that's just one element of LGBT, is just, and so when we kind of, it's not a niche. I think that's what, echoing Chris's sentiment.
And it's also, sorry to, it's also really, really important that this is not just a niche, but this is a growing market, because as our understanding and our acceptance of the wild diversity of human behavior has become more and more understood, you know, people are embracing actually how they feel on the inside, and are allowing themselves to express themselves in these different ways, particularly as they bash down stigma, which everybody in this room has a role in and has had a hand in. So this can only travel in one direction, because people are not going to give these freedoms up.
Well, exactly. and year on year, that study has shown an increasing, more and more people across all age groups are identifying as not 100% heterosexual.
And to that point, I guess, I'm not sure who wants to take this one, but one of the reasons that we started this conversation about why we should even have this event is because I think it's important that I start seeing representation from our community existing, but the representation that I've seen doesn't represent me. I am Indian, I am a Hindu, I have been raised in the Midlands, I am a gay man, but people like me almost don't exist, apparently. So when I see adverts showing same-sex couples, I see a cisgendered white man and his cisgendered white man partner, and that isn't real representation. So I guess to the panel, what I'd like to hear is what narratives are missing and what do we need to do to kind of encourage people to realize that the LGBTQ plus community isn't just gay white men.
Can I just very quickly jump in with a point here, because we had a conversation with a group of LGBTQ plus disabled people only last week, really, because we're undergoing an inclusion process where we're talking to different groups of people to say, what is going to make you feel welcome at this organisation that we're building? How can we make you feel part of the family? And one of the things that they all kind of agreed on was that they were sick of seeing buff, white, cisgendered hunks in wheelchairs in their when they were represented, and that was making that group of people feel even more alienated from the kind of representation that was supposed to be inclusive. And they were just like, this actually says nothing to me about my life. And you want to talk about people who are missing.
Yeah,
there's a group of people who are missing.
Good point. And yeah, I'm going to open it to this before I kind of chip in with something else that you've just kind of reminded me. Tamara, can I come to you first?
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's not really rocket science, because actually it's just about audience profiling, and brands do that for on their marketing. We do it when we're working with clients and doing social listening and finding out what people are saying. I just feel like it's not really a good enough excuse to say we don't know what different audiences we should be talking to. Just do the research, break it down into different audience profiles, and just do better. So I kind of get a bit frustrated that we are still having the conversation of that there are so many people not being represented. I want to see myself represented. The Renault ad, I loved it because I don't think I've seen an ad featuring lesbians over 50, for example. So, I got super excited. That's probably one ad in 5 years. Hooray for me. So I just feel like it's lazy, and the data is out there.
I think as well, adding on that somehow is so marketing is called marketing until it's anybody outside of society that's not straight and white, and then it's either called culture marketing, or it's called LGBT marketing, or it's called black marketing, but then it's marketing. So isn't marketing just marketing? I think we need to, and we can do that as well, is change the terminology. We're changing terminologies in our industry already about blacklist and whitelist, and sticking all keywords on a blacklist and all of that. We know that just strikes a negative tone about race. So, but I think there's other things as well, like the fact that we call whenever a brand, and we get it all the time, 100 times a week, literally, where a brand will say, we want to do an LGBT marketing campaign. Well, no, you don't. You just want to do a marketing campaign, but the reach wants to be good into the LGBT community. It's still just a marketing campaign, and you're still just adding extra reach to your campaign. And I think, terminology, and the reason I say that, because case in point has just been proved. Key workers, I know I've harped on about this a lot, but a year ago, the black bus driver, or the Indian lady in Tesco's, or the LGBTQ plus person cleaning the hospital at the end of the day were just called low-paid, low-skilled workers. Never once did a brand ever write, could you help my brand reach low-paid workers? Never once did a brand say, oh, can you just make sure that we've got good penetration into the low-skilled workers? Never once. But now every brand for the last 6 to 8 months on every brief they've written has said, can we make sure we reach keywords, please? The exact same people, low paid, low skilled, Black, Indian, LGBTQ+, whatever. So that change of a word, you know, it was a change of a word with a clapping of the hands for a few months, but that has changed everything. Every government campaign wants to reach into these demographics. The spend in Indian, Pakistani and Black and LGBT media has gone through the roofs more in the last 10 months than have been in the last 8 years. You know, so we can change it just by changing little things, you know, words, what it is that we're actually trying to say, you know, and I think we can do that. It's being done a lot at the moment for race. It's being done a lot for the Black community, for the Indian community, and, you know, what does BAME actually mean? Because if you go on the government's website, it's got, you know, it's got Black, it's got Indian, it's got Muslim, it's got an Irish traveller. You know, we haven't all got the same cultures. Like we're all individual. We're all super communities, and we all deserve to be spoken to individually with the respect, with the authenticity, and with the same amount of spend and effort that you're going to do with everybody else. But we are all different. These communities are all different, and I think we can change the narrative by changing them little things. Like when a brand does say, can we do an LGBT? No, but I can't do an LGBT campaign. I don't do that. But I can do a marketing campaign that's got good penetration into the LGBT community. And we can add it on to the rest of your campaign.
And what I'm hearing there, Chris, is around changing the narratives. Part of that can be by changing the language. And Ali makes a great point about language mattering. There's some really brilliant points and questions being raised in the chat. So thank you for those of you who have been contributing, and we will come to those in a second. And Sebastian, there was a really amazing, Sebastian Parker, a great question that you've posed, which I would really like you to ask the panel in a few minutes. And please feel free, after the next question to the panel, we will come out to you for your questions. So I would like to, I guess the last question for me is, we're in 2021, we're having this conversation about driving representation, which almost feels a little bit nuts, because you think we should have, and well, we absolutely should have made more progress. What do we want to see by 2030? What does the future look like for our representation of our community? What do you want it to look like?
Who are you asking?
All of you. I'd like to throw it open to the panel. Ben, I've seen you've come off mute.
I can come off mute if it's helpful for you.
Yes, please.
Thought someone should. In fact, Tane, I think it is, has made a great comment in the chat about use the data. And I think to Tamara's point, and the point also made by Joe, you see the same white muscle boy couple repeatedly because it's a lazy action by a lazy brand who hasn't thought about the audience and is probably signaling more to a straight population that they've got some gays in the ad than to anybody else. But we know that all of these brands we work with, brands we are, have incredible access to data and insight and understanding and incredible resources to understand their audiences. And using that data in the way that they might use it to look at any marketing segment or understand any individual that they're trying to reach, it's use the very same data to understand how you might better represent communities within campaigns. You've got the information, it's there, it can be mined, it can be understood. And from that, you can understand who you might be speaking to, how you might speak to them, and how you might represent them. And I think that would fundamentally change, that bit at the beginning around data would fundamentally change the bit at the end around who ends up on screen, because you've just gone on that journey of having that understanding and used the marketing smarts to go, actually, it's smart for me to put this sort of, to make this series of actions. That's how we use data in any other sense. And it can be used in the same way here to arrive at smarter representation. That would change overnight who ends up on screen at the end of the process.
Yeah, and that data there's more and more of it, and it's fresher and fresher and stronger. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the YouGov stuff. There's just shocking and amazing facts that come out of that, and indeed we're doing a census which is hoping to inform and fuel future thing, which is working with YouGov and MRS Pride to cut the data from just an LGBT. There's not enough statistical representation of T in it, but we've done some qualitative work to help add a little bit of that picture in there. But that's the first time they've cut that thousands and thousands of a look across the UK and actually portray a picture that people can then mine, be an open resource that people can actually use and leverage to help do exactly what you're saying, Ben. It's really good.
Can I quickly answer your question? What,
Yeah,
where we want to be in 2030? Because I don't know if anybody.
Go for it.
Sorry, Ali, but don't worry, we will have sold well before this. But creative equals and brand advance and advertising should not be around. Should not. Why we didn't, you know, Joe, your museum should definitely still be around, but you know, because that's history and we want to preserve it. But this, the services that we have to do for people, the hand holding that me and Ali and people at advertising have to do day in, day out, telling the same people that already know it. They know it because they've been to Cannes and heard it for the last 5 years. And they've been to Adweek and heard it for the 5 years before that. And advertising knows what it's meant to do. Let's not kid ourselves, you know, but they will use us to make it easier to reiterate how it can be done again. But yeah, by 2030, me and Ali will be on a beach because we'll have sold to somebody and you know, be quits in. But our companies should not be here anymore in the guise that they are now, because at the moment we're here because there's this gap in people doing the right thing and doing the commercially sensitive thing. You know, our companies aren't here because the world needs to be a better place. It is, but that's just a byproduct of what we actually do. And that is helping you reach everyone in society, making sure that your team is fully represented. Brand advance is making sure you're spending money in the publications and the platforms that represent these demographics and reach them. And, you know, yeah, that should just be called marketing in 2030. If not, well, I'd just like the world to stop spinning so I can get on.
So I really want to give our audience an opportunity to ask some of their questions. So there's one here that has come out, which is about the prevalence of coming out as a narrative. So the question is, they'd love to hear your views on the prevalence of coming out narrative being centered in advertising and popular culture, and the problems with these narratives being highlighted above all others. So Tamara.
I'm happy to jump in on that one because actually it's relevant to the 2030 question as well. I think I see it almost like baby steps for brands. It's quite a sort of an easy narrative to use to sort of show allyship, for example. It's always going to be a well done one, but I feel like we will be moving on from that. So that feels very of the moment and maybe 5 years ago. And I think we will move on from that narrative very naturally to the point where the storylines are just quite mundane, really, and we're sort of normalizing, and that the coming out story is perhaps not a big deal at all.
Excellent, thank you. And Sebastian, I saw that was one of your questions, and you did have another in the chat. Was there anything else you wanted to ask the panel?
No, not really. That was a good answer. I just think I like what you said about celebrating the mundane, and I think once advertising gets to that point and these sort of certain things to do with queer culture aren't sensationalized, then it will kind of lessen the othering, and then that will be more towards like integration, I guess. With like the rest of representation of heterosexual people and cisgender people, etc.
You said it much better than me.
That's very eloquent. I think, yeah, usualizing difference is so critical to reducing people's ignorance and fear about other. And those others are very intersectional, and they don't just come, they're not black and white, but people need to be exposed to it to understand it. And you know, I can imagine a lot of us are based in London in the advertising industry, but outside of our bubble, people really don't see this in their day-to-day life. And advertising is one of the few streams that get fed to them, whether they like it or not. And we can use it as a force for good to usualize difference. And it's interesting, you know, I appreciate it when I see it, so that my parents are exposed to it, because they don't see a whole side of, you know, they don't get to see it. And so it makes it more inclusive and a known entity, and reassuring for those, your support group around you. So yeah, I hope in 2030 it's just totally usual to see all ethnicities, intersectionalities of all sorts, age, disabilities, represented much more, and actually enabling much richer, more interesting stories, I think, and actually capturing more attention and doing better jobs as advertisers. We should be doing it.
Thanks, Lucy. I've seen a question from Christy. Would you like to ask it? If you want to, please come off mute.
Hope my internet is forgiving here. No, I just wondered if anyone felt there were any industries that we could look to say, actually, this industry, for instance, is ahead and already in some places where we wish marketing were. Maybe a bad example is the film industry, but it's kind of the easiest one to point at in some ways. I think I've seen a lot more shows and films that are what I would consider to be representative. So I just thought I'd ask that question.
For me, it's the army.
Okay.
I think the army, as the British Army, but armies around the world, really. Well, let's look at Western world, let's say. But they sort of, well before this conversation started within this industry, that conversation was had, the mistakes were realised. I mean, it's actually back in the news. The British Army's back in the news this week, aren't they, about giving all the medals back for people that lost their medals when it was, you know, I don't know if anyone's seen it. So, yeah, when I was in the army for 10 years, and even though I wasn't out, I remember still seeing representation in the army that was out and proud and happy, and it changed, you know, over time. It changed what I thought I was meant to be as a soldier, and then in the end they ended up coming out. So yeah, the army is definitely one that's ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Was there any other questions from our audience that you'd like to ask our panel? Please feel free to come off mute or share it in the chat. So we've had one come up. So Luke, would you like to come off mute to ask your question, or do you want me to do it for you?
Yeah, happy to jump in and ask it. Simply, without going into all of the blurb of the text I wrote, is how responsible ought brands or ads be for challenge and change in society? And I put a bit of background on the Cadbury campaign there.
Who would like to take that?
Happy to just sort of throw some insight here. I feel that brands do have a responsibility because they have a platform, and they're not always going to get it right first time. What's really interesting is when you do get the people calling for a boycott, there are some brands who perhaps they've got nervous and then backtracked. And I think that can almost, you know, it really damages things because they're sort of bowing down to that pressure. It takes a lot of guts for brands to be bold in the first place. And it takes even more guts to sort of stand up when people are calling for a boycott, which is obviously not what you want to see from a brand reputation point of view. We've worked with brands like HSBC, who over the years have been supporting Pride in Birmingham. They've done some amazing campaigns, and you know, several years back, they were getting an awful lot of abuse. And over the years, they've just got stronger and stronger at standing up to people who see things differently and not being afraid to say, actually, this is what we stand for as a brand. And it's okay if you want to take your business elsewhere. That is courage. And I think it sends a really strong message and it kind of just raises things up for society as a whole. I may have a very kind of optimistic view of marketing changing the world, but I really do think that bold brands can make a difference.
Can I jump in here as well? I mean, if you think about the dining room campaign from 1994, which was the IKEA thought of as the first gay advert from a mainstream brand, and they received bomb threats as a result of that, and they still stood by it. And I think they came out of that stronger as a result. I mean, the ad itself was very kind of white bread, but you know, I think it just shows that you know, they needed to stand by that. You know, I think about a company like Levi's who we have a partnership with, and a lot of their roots is right there in inclusive workspaces that go right back to the 50s in when America was basically under apartheid, and they still had mixed workspaces. And you know, I certainly know that the approach that I've seen them take is one where they are talking to everybody, but they are talking to everybody as a diverse set of people, and they're pretty fearless about it.
Brilliant, being fearless. I'm going to ask Hannah just to ask your question as our last question, because I'm conscious we've got about 5 minutes before we summarize. I think this one's really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess this was a thought that I had, where you could maybe see if advertising moved towards more brands actually making a commitment, because we've been talking about, you know, saying, okay, well, it's all just tokenism and you're just representation. It's like you're just representing these people in front of the screen, but you're not actually doing anything behind screen. So I'm wondering whether you might be able, you know, give me your thoughts on whether you think that companies might use that a bit more in the future. So for example, at the moment, with environmental concerns, people are saying, oh, we're now moving towards recycled plastic, or all packaging is now made out of paper. So maybe if that would be a way that, you know, there's actually some action and not just, you know, smoke, I guess.
I think it comes back to Tamara's point of it has to be authentic, and the ones that get the least backlash are because they can quickly come back and go, yeah, we actually live these values, and this is grounded in who we are. It's consistent with the brand, completely defensible. All touch points, all members of their company and their brand understand that principle and defend it. And yes, I don't think jump on the bandwagon, get involved, support LGBT, support diversity inclusion. Just do it genuinely and commit to it. And they all should. I mean, I was doing some work, and there's loads of research that supports actually, particularly the younger generations are expecting brands to stand for social purpose and positive change. In America, it skyrocketed with Trump. People were like, we know brands actually have a bigger sway and can drive this more than the politicians. So there's a huge appetite for consumers, and they're expecting increasingly to see brands taking a stand. So do it, brands, is the shorthand, but do it authentically.
And just to that point then, sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, I think brands can help in their procurement process really quickly. The procurement, like, Hannah, I think the fastest way a brand can affect change in society is to put it in the procurement process, because the one things brands have is money. And the one thing that will change any board's or any company's view on anything is access to that money. So if you change procurement that says you must have this value, just like we did for gender equality, just like we've started to do for pay equality, if we did that as well for LGBTQ plus representation within a company, societal change would come a whole lot faster, because money talks.
And it's also, isn't it? It's about how what the grassroots support as well as the sort of visible stuff. So again, a bit of a name check and a thank you to Ben. The work we do with M&C Saatchi. So as a young charity, the question that we were asked when we met the company was, "What do you need?" It wasn't what can you do for us. It was, what do you need? And that is the question that companies need to ask themselves again and again, I think.
Excellent. So with 1 minute till we close. I'd like to go around first of all and just ask for one top tip for our audience so that we can drive and move representation. Just a top tip for our audience. Ben, can I start with you?
Oh, I'm first again. Thank you, Bhavik. I mean, to the point we've just made, commitments are, of course, always welcome. But if you look at the commercial opportunity, things will move faster than any commitment would let that. And that there is commercial opportunity. Look into the data and understand it, and that will drive the change more quickly.
Thank you, Ben. Lucy?
I mean, I would pretty much say that, like, you know, convince the unconvincible with facts and things until they can't ignore them any longer. But for me, I think all positive, encourage efforts and trials, and let's not bash people when they do it wrong, but rather go, that wasn't great, but this is how you can do it better, and be more like supporters and enabling that. And that's certainly what we try to do with advertising.
Sounds like
and if in doubt, ask.
Thank you, Lucy. Tamara?
Be brave, use the data, celebrate the mundane.
Amazing. Thank you, Tamara. Chris?
Procurement. So look, whether you're a brand or whether you're an agency, look at how you procure, look at what you've got on your procurement roster, and make sure that roster is representing. And if it is, then the work's going to follow. Brilliant.
And Joe, last but not least.
I think it's several things. It's that just do it. Be fearless, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to not get it right, and also to work with communities and include those as part of your sort of mainstream audience, which I can't possibly pass up the opportunity to talk to this audience and say that if there are any organisations here that want to work with a charity like ours, please do get in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, to Joe, to Chris, Ali, Tamara, Lucy and Ben for being part of this. And we hope you enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to connect with us, then please reach out. But thank you all. Have a great evening. We look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye.